coming to you from the beautiful metaverse, and also from my office. And this is Midday with Reverend Don. And as you probably know, this is my new daily broadcast that I have only just started. This is the third show, and this program is intended to be maybe a little more personal than some other things I've done. I'm going to talk a little bit more about my own life. I'm going to talk about subjects of interest. I'm going to have interviews. I hope to, as we go forward, bring people on. And I certainly hope to talk to people in the chat room. And um, yesterday, we had a pre recorded segment of my recent interview with Belladonna Laveau from the Aquarian Tabernacle Church. I thought it was a particularly good interview. I was very pleased with it. I've had an association with the Aquarian Tabernacle going about 40 years back. The late Pete Pathfinder Davis was a very good friend of mine and a mentor to me. And now Lady Belladonna is the head of the Aquarian Tabernacle Church. I think she's doing a wonderful job. And if you did not already watch that interview, I highly recommend it. In future, we'll be bringing you more interviews. And next week will be Jason Mankey and other interesting personalities in the future. I also will probably be going back to some of the interviews that I've done in my many, many years at Magic TV. One that I'm sure at some point will run is with Olivia Robertson, the founder and um, many years leader of the Fellowship of Isis. Lovely woman, very interesting interview. And I want to say hello to Lori in the chat room and hello to uh, Lilith in the chat room. Welcome. And if anyone in the chat room has any questions, anything you'd like me to focus on, just let me know. And I will certainly do that. Hello to Mary. Um, and so these are some of the things I'm going to talk about today. You'll see that I am wearing a scarab for my necklace. Not an archaeological scarab exactly, but I think it's a nice one. I like it. And I think I'm sure I'm best known. Oh, and hello to Krista. And and Lilith is happy that I've remembered that it's Lilith. But always remember Lilith. Um, I physically met Lilith in the United Kingdom when I went there for lustration, and a lovely person. And Lilith is from the Netherlands. So we have an international audience today, which I'm not surprised by, and I believe that Sir Jason Hi Corel, my nephew, is also present. Welcome, Jason. As I was saying, today I am wearing a scarab, and this has to do with. I think I'm obviously I'm best known for my Corellian work, but I'm also an archpriest of Isis in the Fellowship of Isis, as well as a number of other things. And I've been active with them for many years. And hello to Bradley in the chat room, and Arlene, welcome. And I I have great fondness for the Fellowship of Isis. Um, for many years, I was active in the Chicago area fellowship where we would do an annual convention, which is still going on today. And this year I might be there because I'll be back in the Midwest at that time in the year, which is in the fall. And Lady Dina, who in those years was the leader of the fellowship in Chicago, would stage the Isean liturgies, which are mystery plays, as full theatrical productions. And they were remarkable, and they still do that today. Um, today, I believe it's Archpriestess Demetria who leads the fellowship in Chicago, and she's still doing the mystery plays. And they were just a remarkable experience. And in those days, I had a huge costume box of all my different robes that I had amassed for these plays, and they were quite fascinating. All of the liturgy of the Fellowship of Isis was created by Olivia Robertson, who um, what was under divine inspiration in creating them. You might say they were channeled, you might simply say they were divinely inspired, you might call them oracles, and they always feature an oracle. When people do the I see in mystery plays, sometimes they simply read the oracle that Lady Olivia brought through when she created it. Sometimes they bring through an original oracle, and sometimes they do both. But oracular work is very important in the Fellowship of Isis, as it is in the Corellian tradition. There are a lot of similarities between the two organizations, and many differences as well, as is to be expected. But some of the mystery plays that I most remember, I can never forget the mystery play of Hades and Persephone. It was a most remarkable experience, and probably of all the choreography Lady Dina did, it was the most beautiful. And she had the actual liturgy talks about 50 nymphs on the plains of Etna. Well, there weren't 50 of them, but there were 15, 20 nymphs with ribbon twirlers doing this dance. It was remarkable and complex and beautiful. One of them was my niece Sherry, who was 11 at that time, perhaps, and it was just a beautiful play. But it also had some interesting things happen, and one of them is it became very clear that when you do these mystery plays, you're taking on the energy of the play, and you must be prepared for that. A lot of people found that things they were working on kind of died and were reborn during the process of putting on this play. And in fact, the priest who acted as Hades um, in the play died shortly after, which um, was most unfortunate. But it was also one of those deaths that is very inspiring in its way. He literally died at prayer at his altar. Um, it was very, 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 very spiritual in its way. Unfortunate that he had to leave us, but it was just interesting to see all the synchronicities with this play. Um, Another year was Mystery of Ishtar and Tammuz, which I will always remember because, well, for many reasons, but one of them is that there was so much incense on the altar that you could see the smoke going up the wall and across the edge of the ceiling, which is a lot of incense. Um, but it was quite beautiful. They were all quite beautiful. They were quite interesting. So if you have a chance to go to the ICN convention in Chicago, I recommend it. As I say, it may be that I will be there this year. I haven't been able to attend in some time because I'm living on the other side of the country. Um, it is one of many things that I have done in my career. And here in Jacksonville, I've worked with, we'll say Egyptian groups, neo-Egyptian groups. Um, so I've had quite a bit of an interface with Egyptian spirituality and neo-Egyptian spirituality. I am a great believer in the idea of being inspired by the past, but I do not believe we can recreate it. And I don't think that we are wise to try to recreate it, but rather bring it into the modern world. And hello to Mary Hawk in the chat room. If anyone in the chat room wants to ask any particular questions, please feel free. One of the questions I received after my first program from Lord Bowen had to do with illustrations. He asked if I could speak a little bit about that. And since Illustration Weekend is coming up in April, I thought that I would go ahead and speak about that. And I want to make sure I'm giving you the correct day. But it's the weekend of April 22nd. And it will be a virtual illustration this year. We've been doing virtual illustrations since the beginning of the pandemic. I believe this will be the last virtual illustration, then we'll return to live illustrations next year, presumably in Danville. And it will still, I'm sure, be a hybrid illustration because having people able to attend virtually allows people from all over the world to take part, and we wouldn't want to lose that for anything. But coming together physically is also a wonderful thing. But one of the things that people often ask about illustrations is where did they start and why are they the way that they are? And there's a bit of a story in that. Illustrations began as private ceremonies of the Mother Temple, the Corel Mother Temple, honoring the ancestors. And what illustration does, it's a ceremony of purification and blessing of the ancestors. And um, it can, in theory, be very, very simple. You bring through the oracle of the ancestors and with it their blessing, and you disperse this through water. That's all the real ceremony is. But the public ceremony that has grown up is basically a statement of Corellian theology around this relatively simple ritual. It speaks about the nature of creation and incarnation and and the witchness of the why and everything. It is therefore a highly scripted ritual. I'm not usually big on scripted rituals, but when you're basically retelling your entire theology or a large part of it, you kind of have to have set words. So it's I think a very beautiful ritual. We did a lustration at the Toronto Parliament of World's Religions. We are, I believe, doing another one um, at the upcoming Chicago Parliament of World's Religions. And Lori Blackman will be coordinating that. And we got a very interesting compliment after the illustration in Toronto, which is that one of the people there said that she had always thought that ADF rituals were rather complex and long, but having seen a Corellian illustration, the ADF had nothing on us. I've always considered that a compliment. I'm not sure it was meant that way, but I feel that the illustration really is an encapsulation of Corellian thought, and that's why it is the way it is. Now, if we go back to the rituals of the Mother Temple before it became a public ceremony, was it like that? No, it was not, because we already knew these things. We didn't need to make a statement of them. And hello to Julia in the chat room, who's joining us from England. Welcome. And we have had, since the illustrations became public in, I believe, year 2 Aquarius, we've had them in many different places, including England. We've had them all over the US. We've had one in Canada. We have had regional illustrations in Spain um, and also virtually online. There are 2 illustrations a year. One is intended to be universal and the other regional. The universal has one ceremony honoring the ancestors particularly and bringing through their blessing for the entire tradition, which is conducted by the Corel Mother Temple, usually hosted by some other temple, and usually involves most of the leadership of the tradition. The regional illustration, however, can be at any eligible temple. You need to have someone who can act as an oracle to have the central part of the ceremony, but any temple that can do that can have a regional illustration, and it's a simpler ritual, in part for that reason, and it's meant for as many people who want to do it as possible to do it. And if you have a temple and you'd like to do a regional illustration, please do consider doing that. I think it's a very valuable experience. And with the regional illustration, we're honoring the living. We're honoring the new members of our tradition, the younger members of our tradition, the living members of our tradition, even though we're still also honoring the ancestors and bringing through their blessing. Um, and that's basically what illustrations are. And why are they set up as they are? Why are the ancestors acknowledged in the spring and, well, let's say the future acknowledged in the fall, when we're usually thinking in different terms? And part of that has to do with the antiquity of the ceremony and the fact that it was being influenced by other things um, going on around in society at that time. It used to be that there was a great deal of ancestor veneration um, during the spring connected with um, the holidays that were occurring at that time. And I think that is why the spring is the illustration of the ancestors, but also because in the spring things are growing and coming forth, and we want their influence to constantly grow. So it's those 2 things that I believe placed it there, but it predates me, and I can only say what I think that it is. And in the fall, we're looking for the harvest, and Our new members, our future members, if you think of it, are the harvest. So to me, it makes perfect sense, but it's what we've always done. Lustrations have often been the occasion of major announcements, major activities. If someone is to be elevated to a new standing, to a member of the archpriesthood, for example, or to the council of elders, it often happens at a lustration or is announced at a lustration. Many other things happen at lustrations. This coming lustration will be relatively simple because this year we're placing a lot of the emphasis that commonly goes on illustration on the Parliament of the World's Religions. And if you're not familiar with that, we will be going en masse to the Parliament of the World's Religions in Chicago, Illinois, where it's returning for its 30th anniversary as a modern event and its 130th anniversary altogether. And as I say, we'll be having illustration there. We have a number of things going on during that week, and it is the week of August 13th. And we're looking forward to that very much. And if you follow our media, you'll hear more and more about it. And on the Sunday following, there will be a number of events as well, including in part of the day, there will be a reception for the Fellowship of Isis that I'm hoping to attend at the Life Force Arts Center in Chicago. And if you happen to be in Chicago and you've never been to the Life Force Arts Center, you totally should. It is a spiritual learning center and teaching center, but also it's an art gallery. And they have the most beautiful artwork there. And many cultural events, many community events take place there. And in fact, I would hope that Joan Forrest Mage, who runs the Life Force Arts Center, might be one of the people I'll be interviewing on this program in the future, because she has many interesting stories to tell. But in the meantime, I have interviewed her in the past on Magic TV, and those interviews are still there. I've spent many years doing video and audio work, and interviews were one of the big things, and also instruction. And do we have anything else people would like to discuss in the chat room? Now, if you were watching our media yesterday, you may have seen some photos labeled Reverend Don in Retirement that showed me working on my stop motion animation puppets. And Sir Laurie in the chat room says that today is the last day to register for Parliament using our group rate of $250. So if you want to register under that group rate, please do so today while you can still take advantage of it. It is a very good rate to get to the Parliament for a membership. And you can use the code CNC 2023, CNC 2023. To secure that rate. Now, Mary is asking when I'm going to Chicago, but she means to move. And actually, I'm not moving to Chicago. I'm planning to move back to Danville, which is where the Correllian tradition originates and grew up, as did I, for that matter. But it will be later in the year, certainly by Parliament. The exact timing has not yet been worked out, but we are looking at that in the future. So if you're in Florida, I'm still here for a while. And Natalie in the chat room, hello, Natalie, says, yay, Danville. And I love seeing so many people in the chat room. And I hope to interact more as we go forward. Danville is an interesting community. It has more metaphysical background. The whole Midwest has more metaphysical background than many people remember. And welcome, Melanie, in the chat room. One of the interesting things, we were talking last year with the Buckland Museum of Witchcraft, and the subject of the Lawrence Museum of Witchcraft came up. And apparently this is something that many people have heard of, but they don't know if it was real. Apparently, from what I understand, there are no photographs of this museum anywhere, except for maybe one or two that appeared in old newspapers. However, it so happens that I have a whole suite of photographs from a story I did on the museum back in the 80s. I knew Lawrence, who ran the museum, quite well, um, L. Edward Lawrence, and actually we were distantly related. And let us suggest that we might have a chancellor's chat at this hour at some point, and I will consider that and how it would function, because that could be quite interesting to bring in numerous people to chat all together at once. I think that would be lovely. Um, but the Lawrence Museum is one of those things that for 50 years it was a metaphysical attraction in central Indiana and had fascinating exhibits. Of which I'm not sure. I might have the only surviving photographs. I don't know because the museum was broken up after 1989, and the pieces, to the best of my knowledge, were scattered among different collectors. And hello to Christine. It's good to see you. And it's so nice to have so many people joining us, and that makes me feel very good. One of the things that the Lawrence Museum had were artifacts of Aleister Crowley. The Lawrence Museum was founded by a woman named Lydia Beckett. Um, and Lydia Beckett was a friend of Caroline Heikerel and I believe a cousin of Caroline Heikerel, but I don't know the exact degree of relationship. And also, my family being as they are, she could have been an honorary cousin. I don't really know. But they were associated and they were both involved in the Universalist movement as well as the witchcraft movement. Um, Natalie asks if I'm saying Lawrence or Lorenz. It's Lawrence, as you would normally see it as a first name. Um, Lawrence. And L. Edward Lawrence was a fascinating person. He was one of those people who told so many interesting stories that you kind of had to wonder how many of these are true. But every one that I could check out was true. Um, and I found that there are people who just have so many interesting experiences. And hello to Sarah and hello to Diane. So many interesting experiences that you might wonder, but they've actually done it. I was speaking the other night about Kestra, who was one of our priestesses, who had done so many things that seemed unlikely for one person, and yet I had seen evidence for every one of them. Um, and Mary says that she's so glad we're doing this in the afternoon because she's awake, and that's very cool. Now, Bowen said that he was familiar with my artistic work, but not really the stop motion. And although oh, there it is. And asked if I could speak about that. And yes, I absolutely can. And you'll probably be seeing little photos of that um, coming out. And it'll be part also of my Patreon as I get it set up. But I did my first stop motion work in 6th grade. And in fact, I recently reconnected with an old friend that I had known from childhood who worked with me on that same movie. And we were talking about it. And in subsequent years, I've done a large number of different video things, including animation, in different ways, but not stop motion. And I'm currently working on a stop motion version of Edgar Allan Poe's Raven. And I'm currently working on creating the puppets. As I say, if you look on my page, I believe they're on my page, you can see the very starting point of the puppets. But within the next few days, you will see them transformed. And there are 2 puppets. And Mary Hawk says, nevermore, which is the theme of that poem. One is the narrator, who has no particular name, but I might end up giving him one because, I just have to. And the other is Lenore, his deceased wife. And to make these, I am using a Hagrid doll and a Harry Potter doll, who will presently become Harriet. And when they're done, they will not resemble their original characters at all, I don't think. And the process of doing them, I am filming and do plan to share with people. And hello to Reverend Michael, welcome. It's an interesting process because particularly the Harry Potter doll is becoming a puppet of a middle-aged woman which is about as big a transformation from an adolescent boy as you could possibly ask for. So I'm largely resculpting it, but I chose it for a number of very particular reasons, including the height of the doll versus the narrator doll. And I'm using articulated dolls rather than building um, my stop motion puppets from scratch, partly because I feel they can do everything that is needed, and it's a little simpler. Um, but in the future, you will see. We'll see what happens. I am looking forward to the project. I have done a lot of work with unfinished puppetry in the past, but this time I'm going to get it finished. And Sarah asked if I can speak about dreams on one of these broadcasts, and yes, I certainly can. Um, not we don't have a lot of time left today for that subject, but we can make that a subject to talk about in the future. Um, the main thing I would say about dreams, and I will go ahead and say that now, is it's what it means to you, not what it means to anyone else. But we'll come back to that on another occasion. Arlene asked how I'm going to manage the raven. And I think what's going to happen is that there will be a probably two different sculpted ravens and also hand animation of the raven. And one of the other things I will be doing is hand animating the facial expressions of the characters. Because the dolls cannot, I mean, their eyes will not move and so forth, but that can be put in after, and that's what I'm planning to do. And it's going to be, I'm hoping to have it finished by Samhain, but I cannot guarantee that, but I'm hoping. I'm certainly hoping to have all of the principal work done before I move. But it is, I mean, anything like this is a big job. But the putting it together may happen after the move, but the actual photographing, I hope will happen before. And that's where I'm at. I'm working on it. And of course, with stop motion animation, what you're doing is you're taking the figures and moving them minute little bits and taking photos of each move and then putting them together into a film. And you can do things with stop motion animation you could never do otherwise. Today, with the advent of computer animation, you can get effects that are closer to stop motion animation, but it still has a certain charm of its own. And doing animation by hand, you really could not bring hand drawing anywhere near to the effect of stop motion animation. But the reason I started it, really, and I started it several years ago, and then had to set it aside for a time, was because I wanted to do something that involved working with my hands. If you talk to Sir Edward, he will tell you that when he was doing the worm farm, one of the things he wanted was to actually work with his hands, to work physically rather than intellectually. And I have a long history of doing sculpture and painting and things like that, and I had been away from it for a long time. And the actual process of working with your hands, working physically, can be quite a desirable thing. And I find it a very meditative thing. So when I'm working on these things, I'm also in a meditative state. I also do that when I drive. I know some people who get so emotional when they drive, and they're yelling at other drivers and so forth, whereas I'm in a kind of a Zen state when I drive for the most part. I enjoy long trips driving for that reason. Um, and I consider that, and also when I lived in Chicago and used public transportation, I used that as a chance for meditation as well. And you don't have to be quietly in your room to do meditation. And Sir Laurie says she can't wait to see the puppets. Sir Mary says the same. I think people will enjoy it. Um, I certainly hope they will, and it will be probably eventually be a feature on Lord Don's Library of Horror, which is returning to Pagan World TV in the future. And I'm working with Cosmo Rubiconis to prepare that, and hopefully we will be seeing it not too awfully far in the future. I quite enjoyed doing Lord Don's Library of Horror. I'm a big devotee of horror films, and we'll be back with some new ones here presently. I know people are looking forward to that. Natalie and Mary both say yes, nice. So I think a lot of people feel that way. I I love horror films. Melanie says her mother will love that. But I tend to prefer the older horror films. I think they have more imagination in them than some modern ones, although not all. Some modern ones are quite good, but to do Lord Don's Library of Horror, we have to use films that are in the public domain, which means we will definitely be looking at older ones. But many younger people have never seen these, and they can be instructional in so many ways, as well as interesting. I'm thinking the first one we're going to do is Metropolis, which, although not strictly speaking a horror film, is really part of the genre. Melanie says old is best when it comes to horror. I totally agree. Metropolis is more commonly thought of as being a science fiction film, but most people don't realize it was originally also a metaphysical film. And that's one of the things we'll be talking about when we're screening that film. The metaphysical part that was largely cut out, but how you can still see that it's there and how the theme is still there, even if the more overt parts have been removed. And I think we'll probably also be talking about, and hello to Mark in the chat room, probably also talking about the social milieu of that time. It was the Weimar Republic. It was the golden age of German Impressionist cinema, and just before the rise of the Nazis. And so there were a lot of things going on that involved the people that you see in that film. And the individual stories of those people, I think, are just as interesting. The story of Fritz Lang, the story of Thea von Harpau, the story of Brigitte Helm, all very interesting. So we'll be talking about those different things. Oh, and Mary remarks that she loves my necklace. And as I was saying earlier, this is a scarab necklace. It's not particularly an archaeological scarab necklace, but it's not too far from it either. And I'm glad you enjoy it. With that, we've come to the end of our half hour. I hope that you have enjoyed it. And I will hope to see you on Monday when we are back for our next Midday with Reverend Don. And we will close with a prayer. And if you will join me, Divine Mother Goddess, Divine Father God, beloved ancestors, we ask you to help us to find the joy in our lives and to not lose sight of those things that bring us joy and make our lives worthwhile. We know that there are many things that must be done and many things that can be trying and difficult in life, but joy is always there, and we ask you to keep it before our eyes. And beloved Mother Goddess, beloved Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you, and may you be blessed now and always. And may you be blessed now and always. And until next time, may you blessed be.